Hi, everybody. I'm here with a guest, Trevor Stewart. Trevor, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so Trevor Stewart. I met Trevor Stewart 20 years ago, whenever it
Has it
was.
been that long? Oh my gosh, you're right.
Yeah, I think I was 23 when I got my first band director job. So I was a band director in Alma, Arkansas, where Trevor was a seventh grade student. So Trevor was in my seventh grade band, and that was the first time I met him. And uh, I kind of feel like because Trevor and Danny Darrough, so Danny Darrough was the assistant director there with me. I feel like the whole reason that I was in Arkansas for 2 years was to meet you two. Like when I think about like the whole like process of my life and everything, it's like I was supposed to meet you and I was supposed to meet Danny.
Right.
You were an awesome player at that point. You could play a three octave chromatic scale with a beautiful sound. I mean, you just took to music so quickly, and you were our little superstar. And it was so fun to get to like push you and get you started on the right path.
Well, I was really lucky to have two clarinet playing band directors at the time as well. Not everyone gets that,
Yeah.
especially someone who had majored in clarinet and had like a performance passion as well. I felt really lucky actually.
It's just I can't believe how long it's been. But anyway, so I was a director there for 2 years. I taught some lessons after school, and Trevor was one of the people I would teach. And I took him to the OU Clarinet Symposium one year. And boy, you'll have to fill in the blanks because the older you get, the less you remember from things like that 20 years ago.
Right. Um, well, I think we went to the symposium at least one year, I think maybe two or three. And those were really formative experiences for me because, first of all, I'm like a kid and I get to go with a teacher and ride like 3 hours in a car and like experience this like weird, like, are we like, you're my teacher, but we're sort of like being friends on this trip. Like as a kid, I felt like that was like a really cool thing to do, and also just to like get to experience at such a young age, oh, that's what the clarinet can do. To hear people like John Manassi and Robert or Bob Spring and I'm trying to remember Eddie Daniels and Ricardo Morales, all of these people, Michael Lowenstern, like that blew my mind as a kid. And that experience is like one of the most like formative things that could have happened to me at that age. It really like made me realize what the clarinet could do and what you can do as a clarinetist as a career. And I was just like overwhelmed, but also like so awestruck by everything. That was a really amazing experience.
I'm so glad that I was there at a time to be able to do that, and like take you and
Right.
expose you to that because I mean, Alma, Arkansas is a teeny tiny town, okay? It's small. It had a big band program though. Like it was nuts. There was one year we had 150 in the beginning band. So I mean, it was a substantial band program, but the town is really tiny.
Alma has like 4,000 people, but the school system is somehow like extremely wealthy and we have really nice facilities. And you were there when they built our new performing arts center, I think.
Yeah.
And when you're in the school system itself, you would never think that you were in this like tiny little town in rural Arkansas.
The spinach capital, right?
Right, right. I don't know if that's still a thing, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
It's been so long since I've been back. I think I drove through town over 10 years ago, I think it was, because I was going out to the winery that's a little bit north.
Mhm.
That's a great little winery. I can't Mount Bethel. Oh, I just remembered.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Really nice winery just about 20 minutes north of Alma. And I was like, well, I got to drive through my old stomping grounds if I'm going to go this way anyways. So I drove around the school and looked at everything. It was kind of neat to reminisce a little bit.
Right. I do the same thing. If I'm passing through, I'll kind of go drive around and look at the marching band field and like drive by the little places that we used to hang out. But I try not to stop too much.
I feel the same way about my own high school town. So it's like, I'll just keep driving.
Right.
Well, anyway, we will talk about the music too. But I just wanted to, talk about how we met. And then, of course, we stayed in touch off and on over the years. And then, especially the last 5 or 6 years, we've stayed more in touch. And now Trevor's been quite involved with Clarinet Playground. He's actually recording the entire book for book 2 of Finger Fitness Etudes, book 2. So I think he's going to start that next week, right?
I started today. You're not
Woo!
supposed to see this, but yeah, here they are. I'm writing my notes and I'm starting my recordings today. So.
Oh, how exciting. I can't wait to hear
Yes.
it. So when the book comes out, of course, that'll release August 6th. And then Trevor's recording will be available the same day. So we're trying to make sure it all comes together at just the right time, so that when you get the book, you can also get Trevor's MP3, which will be incredibly helpful because book 2 is a little bit harder, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got some practicing to do.
But it's good. It's a good meaty challenge. And I think it's a logical next step from book 1. And then some of you may not know this, but a month later, so September 10th, I'm releasing Finger Fitness Foundations. And that is like a precursor to book 1. So that's going to be great for people who've only played maybe 2 years or maybe 3 years, and you have to have some kinks to work out before you can really dive into some of these etudes. And so I hope that'll be really helpful for young students as well as like adult enthusiasts who are just kind of getting started, or people coming back and dusting off the cobwebs. But there's some good challenges in those too. I'm kind of designing it to where if you go slowly in 4/4 time, it's great for novice players. But if you go in cut time and really push it, you end up getting a pretty good workout. So, all right, well, let's take a look at Daydreamers. All right.
And I'm not biased here because the piece was dedicated to me. But this, I think, is my favorite etude in book 1, and I would have said that even if it was dedicated to someone else, for sure.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of my favorites too. I think there's so much open. I mean, it's very open to your own interpretation. So you can really like push and pull. You can speed up in places where you feel like the energy wants it to speed up. You can slow down and stretch in other places. And you can just really create little moments and hold notes as long as you want in different places. So it took me a while, but I finally figured out a part of this was influenced by the Cacciatorian trio, and that's that triplet section.
Okay. Yeah.
Like down here, like these little triplets. I mean, that's just da 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 da. Just has that Cacciatorian trio at the beginning. And I did play that, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite chamber pieces. So, of course, I think when I'm writing these etudes, influence is all around, and I'll just be writing something, and then later, like even a month or 2 later, be like, oh, I know what that is from, or that influenced me. And it's not like I'm thinking about it in the moment. It just kind of comes back later. So it's kind of weird.
I think that's very cool. This piece is intriguing to me because of the harmony. You're never sure if you're playing in like a minor key or a major key, and it's sort of always shifting back and forth. And this sort of adds this intriguing quality that it's like it's very mysterious in a way.
Yeah, definitely. There's some mystery in there. And there's just kind of fuzzy edges, if you think about a dreamlike state, or if like you're watching a movie and then they're showing footage of a dream and it's real fuzzy, it's kind of got that sort of feel to it also.
Right.
Well, the finger drills are, you see here at the top, you've got B and C sharp, so that one's a little bit of a coordination thing. And then B to D is a little easier in some ways, but hard in others because you're having to lift a finger from each hand. Both of the finger drills are in the middle section. So this opening section is just, I don't know, it was just the music that seemed to make sense. And then I was like, well, I haven't done the drill yet. I better do something. So then this middle section here that starts at 22, you start to see the drill. So you've got this B natural to D a couple times, and then here's your B C sharp. And it kind of hangs out there for these like 2 or 3 lines. And then we end up back to the opening material again. So most of the drill workout is here. But there's plenty of stuff in this opening material, even though it's not this focused drill, like playing B flat to E flat. Low G to E flat, like in the full measure 2, right? So that's a little bit of a challenge because you can't use this one. 1/1 is kind of clumsy because then you have to lift for your F, so side key seems to be the most reasonable choice there, and that's a little bit of a challenge. See if there was anything else I was going to say. This section here at 31, you're really building up to this kind of climactic moment, and you have this little scale that's going up. Let me think, what is that? It's not quite D major. What is that?
It's kind of like a D harmonic minor.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, melodic minor, sorry.
Well, melodic, yeah, minor. You're right, because the B natural, C sharp, you're right. Yeah.
Right.
B harmonic minor. And you got this scale here the first time in 16ths, and then later it's in 8th notes. So I have had to draw this to some students' attention because they want to play them both the same. So just notice that the rhythm is different. You're going to be more stretched out here and a little bit more hurried here. And then we have the triplets coming down, so you want to count those very carefully and make sure you see when they switch to 8th notes. I think a lot of people struggle going from triplets to 8th notes and remembering to slow down enough. 8th notes are slower than triplets.
I have the same issue when I'm working with some of my younger students on that, well, and older students too, when going from triplets to 8th notes. It's something that I had to work on away from the clarinet, thinking about these rhythms in my head or tapping and just practicing singing rhythms and going back and forth between triplets and 8th notes. And it takes some time to get used to that feeling. But when you do, you can't unhear it, and it drives you crazy when it doesn't work out the right way.
Yeah, I think I usually start, if you can do like a whole measure of triplets and then take a break and then do a whole measure of 8th notes. And then you do a whole measure of triplets and a whole measure of 8th notes back to back. And then you do 2 beats of triplets and 2 beats of 8th notes. And then you do 1 beat of triplets and 1 beat of 8th notes. And if you can get that sort of switch to go off more frequently, then you can go back and forth between the two pretty easily.
Right. And then when you get more advanced, you can do things starting with like a measure of quarter notes, a measure of 8th notes, a measure of triplets, a measure of 16th notes, and moving through all of the different subdivisions. And even beyond that, quintuplets, sextuplets, septuplets, 30-second notes.
I think that exact exercise is in Kelly Burke's book, isn't it? The warm-up book.
That is an amazing resource.
Yes, I love that book.
I hope a lot of people know about it because I didn't discover it until a couple of years ago. I don't know when it was written, but I love it. Okay. Yeah.
I've had it since I auditioned for her, because when I went to grad school for my master's, I auditioned for her and Diane Barker.
Okay.
And obviously, I ended up at Nebraska. I got the book from her when I did my audition, so that was, more than 20 years ago, because that was before I was a band director, so like 22 years ago. So it was in existence at that point, but I'm not sure how new it was at that point, I'll just play a little bit of this intro, and the main thing is save room for your pianissimo. So whatever volume you start, make sure you can still get softer than that so that you can get this cool echo effect. Notice the opening phrase has a shape, a crescendo and decrescendo, and then here we're sempre pianissimo. So this is very distant, very, very quiet, and then you come back, and then you do the distant and quiet again. So there's this sort of back and forth. I'll play a little bit of that. So try to get as quiet as you can and with a clear sound as best as you can, and that's a challenge. Then after that point, it kind of opens up a little bit more. You can be more expressive. I really like to hang out on this B flat for a long time. So that's one of my favorite lines there. Well, Trevor, do you have any other tips or things that you would share with people as they begin to practice this one?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier, you need to save room for these different dynamics changes, so going into pianissimo. And one of the things that I like to think about when I'm dealing with dynamic that is supposed to be meant as a contrast, I don't think it's necessary when you have like piano to pianissimo to be truly piano right before that change to pianissimo. It can be more effective if you're just slightly louder, so like right before, and you sustain your sound a little bit longer. Then when you do come down to pianissimo, the echo can be much more dramatic. And I think that same concept can be applied to a lot of different places. And the same goes for crescendo and diminuendos throughout as well. Often if you crescendo over, if you have a crescendo that goes over a long phrase, if you use all of your energy over the first couple of notes, then you have nowhere left to go. So I like often to think about delaying crescendos and delaying diminuendos for, you know, more of a maximum effect. And that can also give the effect of creating a longer phrase and a longer line.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it was Dan Silver who, if you have like a 2-measure build-up, you know, the majority of your crescendo is like the last half of the second measure.
Exactly.
You save it up until then you can just really show that expression come through. And then we've got to sustain the peaks longer. I think too many people get to the peak and then they want to decrescendo too soon. So let that be a rounded peak, like a foothill instead of a mountain, right? So just let it
exactly.
Go. Yeah.
I think a lot of time you'll see publishers make crescendos and diminuendos starting in a logical place, or just starting too soon or ending too soon. And I think throughout, you know, helping edit this book and then the book that's about to be released, that's one of the things that you've been really conscious about, is logically placing where you put crescendos, where you put diminuendos, so that you sort of compensate for that tendency. You're sort of setting people up for success by providing these phrase markings that are actually going to lead to an organic sounding phrase, rather than one that maybe peaks too soon or fizzles out too early.
Yeah. I used to think when I would see crescendos in like older books and things that have been around for years, it's like, here's about where you might start a crescendo. It just seems kind of vague. So I always like extend it, or I start it sooner, or I'm crossing things out all the time in other books. So I would really try my best. You know, I'm constantly playing this stuff, and I'm playing it, I'm trying to follow what's on the page. And if I feel that I'm not agreeing with what's on the page, I change it. And then I ask other people, I'm like, is this feeling right? So I'm trying to get as much feedback as I can so that the phrasing does make sense.
Right. And then one other note about dynamics in this music, and then all music in general. When you have a crescendo or a diminuendo that's written in perhaps the context of piano, you don't want that crescendo to go all the way to forte, right? I hear a lot of people, especially younger students, who see a crescendo and they go all the way for it, no matter what the dynamic says. And I think one of the important things is to remember, this is a crescendo within the context of whatever the dynamic is that's written. So you have to, we talked about this yesterday briefly.
Yeah.
Your general rule of thumb is you crescendo up one dynamic level based on what you're already playing in, rather than going all the way to forte or fortissimo. And that creates these really obnoxious swells that can be like sickening in a way.
Yeah. If it is supposed to be louder than one dynamic louder, I will mark it in. But if it's just going up one level, it'll just be like what you see here in this first line. So mezzo piano is your peak for the D. That's it.
Right. Yeah,
those are the kinds of things that you think are kind of common knowledge, but you know, as performers and teachers, we need to check ourselves from time to time. Like, what might be common knowledge to us is, you know, completely foreign to somebody else, you know?
Right. I think another thing to consider when you're performing this etude is to sustain the sound. And, you know, don't, like, if you look, for instance, in measure 22, you have mezzo forte, and you have these groups of 4/8 notes that are slurred together. Maybe someone would have a tendency to da 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 dee. And I think it's really more effective if you can really sing through the entire measure and not just groups of 2 or groups of 4 notes. And then, you know, if you keep going on, through that same line, da da dee 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 dee, like really going through. Don't allow the phrase markings or the slur markings to dictate how your air is flowing. Like keep the air going no matter what the phrase markings are saying, you know. I
Yeah,
hear that a
especially
lot as
here
well.
at 22, like really there's an overlying huge shape, right? Like if I had a dotted slur, it would go all the way to that F, right? Yes,
Right.
we are articulating along the way, but you want your air to connect all the way through those articulations. There's no
Mm-hmm.
clipping or lifting or anything like that.
Right. One of the things that I struggled with the most when I was learning this etude was air management.
Mm.
It's really hard to sustain the phrases the entire way if you're not really aware of the quality of the breath that you're taking. So one of the recommendations that I have, when you have to go for a very, very long time, I always, before taking my breath in, I always exhale all of my stale air. I push out all of the air that I can out of my lungs and then take a really, really fresh breath. Now, sometimes that isn't necessary. If the phrase is shorter and you end up doing this and taking these really big breaths over and over again, I had this problem when I was younger and I still work on it to this day. And you understand because you're nodding along, you get stale air backed up inside. And that is one of the most painful feelings as a clarinetist. And so, you know, you might find that throughout this, in this piece, especially when you get toward the end, if you have too much air backed up inside of you, during one of those rests, just take a moment to exhale and get rid of some of that air. And it's really just on an individual basis. You never know how it's going to feel for you specifically. And I know different people have different abilities of sustaining a phrase for a certain period of time based on their, you know, lung capacity and their air management, their reed mouthpiece relationship, all of that sort of thing. Yeah. But I have, there are many times where I actually have to mark in exhale in music, not just where I have to breathe.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time. I have 3 markings that I use. I use a single breath, and then I use a double breath, like 2 little commas, and then an O for out. So when you breathe out, it's like, okay, let the air out in this one measure. Here's your chance to get rid of the bad air before you take another breath later. And sometimes you can breathe out if you have a small measure or two and you know you're going to get a breath later. You can have that moment where you just kind of let some of that out and you still have enough to make it for those 2 measures before your next big breath.
We need an oboist on here to talk about this.
Oh, I played oboe for 6 months and that was like constantly, okay, I'm getting ready to play the oboe. Don't breathe in. Don't breathe in. Breathe out. Okay, now play.
Right.
Woo, that's hard.
Uh-huh. And then I guess one other comment, and this is just one of my general pet peeves in music in general, but I think it particularly applies to slower pieces with the capability of lots of rubato. When you get to a breath mark, allow yourself to finish the phrase that you're playing before you start the next one. You don't have to, in this piece in particular, you really don't have to cut the previous note short and then take a breath and come right back in time. Allow that note to have its full length, beautifully end the note, take a full breath and start again. And if there's an extra half a beat or whatever, it's fine. I think no one's counting. You want it to be as organic as possible, as if you were speaking it in a sentence or singing it in a song.
Yeah, and especially I think I would hope a lot of people know what a cadenza is. If you just think of the whole page as a cadenza and you have that freedom, sometimes just that permission is all you need. Like, oh, play it like a cadenza. Okay, I get it now. So just take your time.
Right.
All right. Well, I think we've covered all the big stuff. There are a couple of grace notes just, scattered throughout. Count carefully here at the end, and you can take your time at the end. Boy, I don't really know what else I would say. For me, the hardest part is this little scale. So decide your pinkies in advance if you want to go right to left or left to right as you cross the break. Either one is fine. Just go with what you can play cleanest. I think that's about it. So Trevor recorded this, what was it, 6 months ago or so, and you put it on your page?
Yeah, maybe it was even like a year ago, but it
Okay.
was, my perception of time, as well as probably a lot of other people's, is a little bit different right now based on the past year and a half.
I know.
So I don't know. It's been 10 years. It's been 2 weeks. It's all the
Yeah.
same.
Well, I was gonna see if you can locate that video, maybe you could post that again so that people
Oh,
can hear
sure.
your interpretation. He played it beautifully, and I'm sure people would love to hear that.
Yeah. I can find a link to that video and post it in the comments of this stream.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna check the comments because, as people know, I have trouble multitasking. I'm gonna see if anybody has any questions. We do have quite a few people watching. So Catherine's here. Hi, Catherine. She's posted a link for Kelly Burke's warm-up book. That's helpful. Jaime's here. He likes that the piece leaves it open to your own nuances. And it can be reorganized for low C, Catherine said. Ooh. We'll have to talk about that. You'll have to tell me your ideas, Catherine. Oh, Catherine asks, why is it in 2 and not 4? That's a good question. Let me go back to sharing real quick. I think I wanted it to be in cut time in a slow 2 so that you feel larger groups of notes and we don't get hung up with like yada dee da dee da dee da, because sometimes people will emphasize those beats too much. So if you're thinking in a very big 2, it's like a fluffy 2, like yada da da yee da 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 dee da 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 dum. And for me, it's easier to push and pull when I'm thinking in groups of 4 rather than groups of 2. What do you think, Trevor?
That's exactly what I was about to say. I think it aids in the rubato. If you're new to rubato or you're not sure exactly how it works, just start experimenting by putting a little bit of a stretch on the first note of each group of 4. Not every one of them, but then you can start to feel what it's like to T da da dee da da dee da da dee da. You have lots of ways you can do it. I wouldn't put it on every group of 4, but that would be a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the remaining 3 notes in that group, practice, pushing forward a little bit.
Yeah. I kind of think of it like if you're on a train and the train goes from the train goes from being completely still to moving, and then the train slows down again. So when I think about a train, don't we say chugga chugga, right? That's kind of the
Yep.
cliche. So chugga chugga is 4 things. So there are 4 notes. Chugga 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 chug. You're starting from no movement to movement, and then you're ending with no movement. So kind of push in the middle and pull on the sides.
I just thought of one other tip. When you mentioned earlier the B to C sharp fingering that this emphasizes, and that's one thing that I struggle with, and I still have to be aware of to this day when I'm rapidly moving between those 2 fingerings, middle finger up to C sharp or G sharp, to keep the pinky really relaxed and not flying away from the clarinet, right? Keeping it, a good exercise is to even practice moving those fingers back and forth without lifting your pinky off of the pinky key, like keeping your pinky at least in contact with it, even when you're not pressing it all the way down. That you don't have to do that in real life, obviously, but it can be a good way to train yourself to use like a micro motion for the pinky rather than this whole big, stress inducing, tension inducing moment.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Trevor. And watch yourself, because if the energy is coming from your fingertip, you're going to be doing this.
Right.
But let that energy come from back here, the base of your hand, your back knuckle, and then you can maintain your curve a little bit better, and you kind of maintain your strength in that finger. It's
And one
hard to
thing
be
that sort of,
strong when the fingers are straight, right? It's harder.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also, it depends on your hand size. That's, how much curve you'll have in that finger. But another thing I like to think of with the C sharp key is if you could imagine that key is actually just another tone hole that you have to cover, just like your ring finger or your middle finger. And somehow that, for me, it makes me focus more on the energy coming from back here rather than from up here. So you
That's
can
a really
imagine a
good-
little hole drilled into your key or drilled into the wood of the clarinet, you know, and you just have to cover the hole each time. It sort of allows you to have a little bit more accuracy as well.
Yeah, something that, you know, a lot of people will do with flute players, like beginners. They'll put that little Velcro circle where the thumb should go.
Right.
You could do those little stick-on Velcro circles on your keys if you have trouble with that, and you'd have something to touch that would be a reminder.
Another place to put the Velcro sticky is beneath your thumb hole for those who have younger students who have the habit of resting their thumb there when they're playing a third tone A or B flat, not B flat, obviously.
I have to tell you a story. So when I was student teaching, I student taught with Lonnie Fuller at Collinsville. I couldn't remember. Collinsville. So he was the director there along with George Fain. Fantastic directors. They were an amazing team. I could not have asked for a better student teaching experience. But Lonnie Fuller is a trumpet player. And he said that when he was learning to play, he kept wrapping his thumb around the front, which you're not supposed to do. It's supposed to be underneath the, you know, the valves and kind of tucked under. And his teacher soldered a tack to the front of his trumpet. And he said it only took once. I was like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
Wow. Nowadays, that sounds like a good way to get someone fired.
I mean, of course, it was like his teacher, right? So
right.
Think about how long ago that was. I don't
know.
want to age Lonnie. Sorry, Lonnie, if you're watching. All right, I know it's a holiday, so I want everybody to enjoy your day. Of course, this will be able to be accessed at any point after this. But Trevor just happened to be available to do a live session, and I did too, because we kind of did our 4th of July stuff, and we kind of wrapped that up about an hour ago. Have you done anything fun today, Trevor?
Not yet. We will join a few friends later this evening for a little potluck, and probably no explosives, but
That's funny. We brought Mom over and we grilled, and the kids splashed in their little pool, and now they're in nap time, and as soon as we sign off, we're going to go out in the pool. So
nice. Sounds like a great time. And it's so wonderful that you got to have your mom over.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun, and I hope you and everyone else watching has a really nice holiday. And I guess I can make the plug for you. Look forward to Finger Fitness Book 2.
Whew, working my tail off on it. I finished the first appendix today. Yay! All right, well, thank you, Trevor, too, of course. And thank you, everybody, for watching, and I'll see you next time around.
It's my pleasure. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.